Commander Zephyx had broken prisoners from 17 different species across the galaxy. His methods were precise, calculated, and had never failed. The hulking Krellian's 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency as he reviewed the files on his latest subject, species, human, female, designation, Captain Sarah Chen, Terran Defense Force. He had heard whispers about humans, these strange bipedal creatures from a backwater planet called Earth. They were supposedly weak, their bodies fragile compared to the armored Krellians or the crystalline Voltari. Yet somehow, they had managed to disrupt 3 major hegemony supply lines in the past year. The prisoner sat in the center of the interrogation chamber, bound by quantum-locked restraints that could hold a rampaging Gorvak. Her small frame seemed almost comical against the massive chair designed for much larger beings. Dark hair fell across her face, obscuring her eyes. "Captain Chen," Zephyx began, his voice a low rumble that had made countless prisoners confess within minutes. "You will tell me the locations of your fleet's hidden bases." She raised her head slowly. Her eyes, those strange, expressive human eyes, met his without flinching. "I don't think so." Zephyx's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. "You misunderstand your situation, human. I have methods that will make you beg to tell me everything." He activated the neural disruptor, a device that sent waves of agony through the nervous system. He had seen Krellian warriors, beings who prided themselves on their pain tolerance, reduced to whimpering within seconds. Sarah's body went rigid, her muscles straining against the restraints, but she didn't scream. She didn't beg. Instead, she looked directly at him and smiled. "Is that the best you've got?" Confused, Zephyx increased the intensity. The energy, reading spiked to levels that should have rendered any sentient being unconscious. Still, the human remained defiant, though sweat now beaded on her forehead. "Interesting physiology," she said through gritted teeth. "But humans have been dealing with pain for millennia. We call it childbirth, marathon running, and Monday mornings." Zephyx deactivated the device, his confidence wavering for the first time in decades. He moved to psychological warfare, holographic projections of destroyed human colonies, fabricated images of her crew being tortured. The human's expression tightened, but her resolve didn't crack. Hours passed. Zephyx employed every technique in his considerable arsenal. Chemical compounds that induced terror in most species only made the human nauseous. Sonic frequencies that shattered Voltari crystal mines merely gave her a headache. Isolation chambers that drove Zerathi telepaths insane were met with what she called me time. "How?" he finally demanded, exhaustion creeping into his voice. "How do you resist?" Sarah looked at him with something approaching pity. "You want to know the secret of human endurance, Commander? We're not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced. But we're stubborn. We're survivors, and we've spent our entire evolutionary history refusing to quit." She paused, shifting in her restraints. "We survived ice ages that should have killed us. We climbed mountains because they were there. We threw ourselves into space on controlled explosions just to see what was out there. We turned our greatest weakness, our fragility, into our greatest strength. Because when you know you're breakable, you learn to bend instead." That's when Zephyx noticed something impossible. The quantum-locked restraints around her wrists were beginning to glow, not with energy discharge, with heat. Intense, localized heat that shouldn't have been possible. "What are you doing?" he demanded, backing away from the chair. Sarah's smile widened. "Something my species learned a long time ago. When you can't break the chains." She raised her hands and the restraints began to deform, the quantum locks failing as the metal itself started to soften. "You make them break themselves." The temperature readings from her location spiked impossibly high. Zephyx realized with growing horror that the human was somehow generating massive amounts of thermal energy through biological processes alone. It was impossible. No species could survive such internal temperatures. The beautiful thing about humans Sarah continued conversationally as the restraints finally gave way, is that we don't have limits. We have suggestions. Our bodies say we can't survive certain temperatures, pressures, or situations. But humans have never been very good at listening to what we're told we can't do. She stood, the melted remains of the restraints falling to the floor with metallic clinks. Steam rose from her skin, but she appeared completely unharmed. Bioengineering is fascinating, she explained, noting his shocked expression. Voluntary control over metabolic processes, localized thermal regulation, pain suppression through neurological conditioning. Turns out when you spend a few generations preparing for interstellar warfare, you make some interesting modifications. Zephyx reached for his weapon, but Sarah was already moving. Humans might be smaller than Krellians, but they were fast, faster than his massive frame could react to. Her hand touched his arm, and he screamed as his exoskeleton began to burn. The funny thing is, she said, her voice calm despite the combat situation, I actually don't know the locations of our hidden bases. Command didn't trust me with that information, in case exactly this situation arose. So even if you had broken me, she shrugged, sorry. As Zephyx collapsed, his nervous system overloaded by thermal shock, Sarah walked toward the chamber door. The metal began to glow and warp at her touch. But I do know something else, she said, more to herself than to the unconscious interrogator. I know that every human you capture is going to be a lot more trouble than you bargained for, because we don't just survive, Commander. We adapt, we overcome, and we never ever know when to quit. The door dissolved under her touch, and Captain Sarah Chen walked out of the interrogation chamber, leaving behind the melted remains of what the hegemony had thought were unbreakable restraints. Behind her, emergency alarms began to wail throughout the facility. But Sarah wasn't worried. After all, she had a ship to steal and a war to win, and humans were very, very good at winning.